When spring rolls around, one thing is pretty much guaranteed in my town. That one thing is the Easter Bunny will be at the mall. I don't remember there being a year when, around March, that plastic flower and egg covered gazebo wouldn't be set up in the food court. And of course, the Easter Bunny in all its fabric covered glory. Now, our mall has a pretty old costume, one which has been around since the early 2000s, and possibly the mid to late 90s. Its fur, which I'm fairly certain was white at one point, had since turned a rather disgusting shade of brown. Honestly, it looked like it had accumulated all those years and years of grime, sweat, and dust without being washed. But the thing that was the creepiest about our bunny were its eyes. While the rest of the head was relatively cartoonish and friendly, its eyes were much more realistic. Just two black screens with a tiny white spot. Those two spots somehow always seemed to be glowing. Then again, maybe that was just how the lights hit the costume. As you know, most malls were closed for Easter 2020 due to the pandemic. Well, not our mall. Not even social distancing was enforced, and the entire town locked down. It got to the point where the rest of the mall was closed, save for one entrance so people could still meet the bunny. Up until last week, I had done a pretty good job of avoiding the mall, due to the virus obviously. But fate works in mysterious ways, and I found myself at the mall, wandering up the hallways, which were pretty much deserted. As I walked into the food court, I felt there was something slightly off. You know that feeling there's somebody behind you, but when you turn around there's nobody there? That feeling. Except it was seemingly all around the food court. I sat down with my sandwich and looked around. Nothing was out of the ordinary at first. Then it dawned on me. The Easter Bunny set was absent. Let me tell you, after seeing that thing year after year, I just couldn't stop glancing over at the spot where it usually sat. Eventually, I just assumed they weren't doing it due to the fact we were still in the midst of a pandemic, and finished my shopping without incident. The rest of the week was normal, up until Saturday when my wife, Elena, suggested we go to the mall just to kill a few hours. I didn't see anything wrong with the idea, so I agreed. This time, the food court was yet again home to that brightly colored gazebo. So I guess they were doing the bunny set this year. I shrugged it off, and then realized that it meant another year with that disgusting, falling apart costume staring at patrons as they ate. Like before, I couldn't stop glancing over at the set, my gaze switching between the sign reading, "Bunny will be back at 1:00 p.m., to the giant plastic eggs surrounding the gazebo, to the way the photographer still watched the empty bench, as if the bunny was still there. "You okay?" Elena's voice jolted me back to reality. "Fine," I said. I tried to shrug it off, and we resumed eating. Until a loud voice came over the mall PA system.
"Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands, or paws, together for the one and only Easter Bunny!"
This time everyone in the food court turned to a pair of large double doors, where a spotlight was shining. A loud drum roll played and my breath caught in my throat, not ready to face that costume. To my surprise, it wasn't the gross costume that walked out. It was a new, friendly costume that looked, well, normal. I sighed with relief, mentally enjoying the picture of that old costume sitting in a dumpster. The bunny did a lap around the food court, high-fiving everybody. And when he got to me, my relief quickly disappeared. As he approached, one furry paw up for a high five, I saw in one eye that same glow the old costume had. We high-fived. And the paw, it didn't feel like a fabric glove. It felt like fur-covered skin. My hand instantly went cold. I decided not to tell Elena about this, and we went back to eating, my gaze still wandering over to the Easter Bunny, now accepting the first of the cute young visitors. What was up with that thing? I wondered. I couldn't shake that gleam I saw in its eyes. Did all costumes have that? And the feeling of our hands hitting, how it had felt like a real hand. How did they manage to do that? I continued thinking about these things for the rest of the day, even going so far as to research several costume companies that specialized in Easter Bunny costumes. Not a single costume I found matched the one in the mall. I realized I needed to figure out a way to find out what was up with that costume. The next day, after tossing and turning all night, I slipped out of the house after telling Elena I was going to the grocery store and made my way to the mall. The plan was simple. I would wait in the food court until the Easter Bunny went on his break, then follow them to the back room and find out that way. If I lost my nerve for plan A, then I'd switch to plan B, which was somehow get close enough to the bunny and pull its glove off to examine it. Either way, the plan was incredibly risky. I got to the mall around 11 o'clock, right after it opened, and sat down in the food court once again, eating a pretzel to avoid looking out of place. I realized I must look slightly odd to the employees, having shown up right at open and seemingly focused on the Easter set. I waited for about an hour, and when the bunny didn't show, I did a lap around the mall. When I got back to the food court, I saw that one of the photographers I'd seen at the bunny set was walking towards me. Her expression was neutral, so I just assumed she was walking past me. "You've been watching. I know," she said, stopping in front of me. "Watching?" I asked, trying to play it cool. "No, I'm just shopping." "No. You've been watching us," she said, tilting her head at the Easter Bunny set. 3 times. You've been here 3 times and watching us the entire time." I sighed and said, "Yeah, you got me. Why does it matter?" "It matters because it means you can feel the magic," she said. "Look, follow me, and I'll explain." I followed her as she walked towards the gazebo, where the Easter Bunny now sat. As we got closer to the bunny, I began to feel that same pull I felt the other day, like I couldn't keep my eyes off the spot. We walked up to the costume rabbit, and the attendant gestured to the double doors. The bunny got up, despite there being children in line, and followed us. We walked in silence through the double doors, and the moment they closed, I turned towards the bunny, grabbed its wrist and pulled, hoping to pull the glove off. From under the head I could hear a human voice crying out, but the glove didn't come off. On the contrary, it grabbed my own arm. I struggled and tried to pull my arm free, but the attendant just shook her head. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." "What's going on?" I asked. "Why are you doing this? What's the magic?" The bunny's grip grew tighter, and I could see the glow in the eye glowing brighter. In fact, it looked like it was leaving the costume. No, it was leaving the costume. The light glowing in an orb between the bunny and myself. "Well done, bunny," the attendant called. "You made a new friend." "New friend?" I called. "What?" Before I could finish, I saw that the costume in front of me was getting smaller, almost receding. I saw its long, white ears retract into its head, its large bunny nose shrink into a human nose, the fur on its arms and legs falling off, revealing skin. Before long, I could see that I was now grabbing the arm of a middle-aged man, wearing a blue suit jacket and gold glasses, which I realized was the exact outfit the bunny wore. The man collapsed, and the attendant simply slung him over her shoulder like a bag of rice. She gestured once again for me to follow, and I did. The orb of light floated on above our heads. I couldn't stop staring at it, but the attendant paid it no mind. We arrived at a storage closet, and it took everything in me not to scream. Lying on the floor, head against the wall, was an old man. Above his head was a Polaroid of the old ratty Easter Bunny costume. The attendant slid the man on her shoulder to the floor, and from her apron withdrew a Polaroid of the current bunny. She positioned him next to the old man, and pinned the Polaroid above his head. I wanted to run, but felt I couldn't. Like in the food court, I felt like I couldn't look away, even as the attendant walked over to me. She stared for a moment, and then grabbed my arm, muttering something in a language I didn't recognize. I saw the orb get closer, and eventually, it engulfed my vision. As it did, my whole body burned with pain. The pain lasted for about 2 minutes, and when I opened my eyes, I tried to say something, but couldn't move my mouth, nor could I close my eyes. I reached up to feel my face, and instead of my face, felt a muzzle. The attendant stepped back, nodded, and said, "You look good, bunny. Now, let's go greet the kids." Thank goodness I was able to steal a MacBook from the Apple Store down the hall. Writing this with pause hasn't been easy, but I managed to do it. And I need to warn you. If you read this, stay away from Firelands Mall around Easter. Thank you all so much for listening to tonight's story. If you'd like to hear more, feel free to subscribe. If there's a horror story that you'd like me to narrate, feel free to email me at catacombslibrary@gmail.com. You can also follow me on social media using the links below, and if you'd like to donate to my Patreon, you can do that as well. I have exclusive content for those who do, and you will be financially supporting this channel, which I'll be very thankful for. For now, your visit to the catacombs has ended. Stay safe out there.